Hey everybody, you know sometimes how you have things stored away back in your memory that you've forgotten about? I had something that occurred to me that, in all my adventures, I'd forgotten how that when I was a young teenager, I was such a huge fan of one of the stations, the radio stations in our town, 62NR, WWNR. I listened all the time. I knew all the DJs. I idolized them. I thought they were just so cool. And I thought that I wanted to be a DJ. In fact, I think probably when I was 12, 13, I set up, and probably a lot of you did this too, I set up my own little radio station in my bedroom. I had a couple of turntables and cassette tape players where I would record my own fake commercials, and I would go from song to song and have commercials and talk, into my microphone. And I just had so much fun doing that. But anyway, I became such a fan that I called into every contest that they ever had, back in the old days, be the seventh caller and you'll win, whatever it was. I don't even remember what the prizes were. Or, he'd call in and he had to answer a question, something about entertainment or whatever. So I particularly became friends with, by calling in so often, several of the DJs. They knew me, when Ronnie Brunk would call. But there's one guy that always worked midnight, I guess it was like midnight to 6. And it got pretty quiet there 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And he didn't mind that I'd call and we'd talk for a while, So it was that was kind of cool. And I felt like, I'm really in touch with my heroes. This is really great. And what I began to do was to write these poems. The first one I did was about Dan. His name was Dan Bailey. At least that's what he went by on the radio. They called him Irish Dan Bailey. And some of you from, Southern West Virginia may remember Irish Dan Bailey on the radio. And there were a lot of others, but he was the first one that I started talking to a lot. And I wrote a poem about Irish Dan Bailey. And I called and I read it to him. And he said, that's really cool. That's funny. It's humor stuff, because I was always doing a lot of humorous things like that. So much to my surprise, he said, why don't you read that on the air? Would you want to do that? And I was like, nervous. Are you kidding? Seriously? Go on the radio, read it on the air. He said, yeah, sure, go ahead. So he put me on the air and I read the poem. And then there were some people that called in saying, that was really great, or that was funny, that was cool, you should have more of that. And so I started doing more of those. Not every day, but every so often I would write the poems. And then, he talked to some of the other DJs and, they said, well, hey, call in my show. And so I would write these funny short poems, and they'd put me on the air and I would read them. They started calling, it got to be a thing, They called me Ronnie Brunk, the NR super fan. And, so I was just on top of the world, thought I was so cool, So they were a great bunch of guys and so good to me, and I really appreciated it. And it was just so much fun. But I became known as the Superfan, and they would I'd call in and they'd say, all right, we got Superfan on the phone and he's going to read his newest creation, and I'd get to read on the air. And I don't know if anybody out there maybe remembers those days and ever heard me reciting any of my poetry on the radio. If you did, let me know. Contact me somehow on, in one of the social medias, or just leave me a comment and tell me. You can contact me on the YouTube channel or Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, whatever, I'm TikTok, whatever. I started getting invited to some of the things that they would have. And, here I am, 13 years old, whatever it was. This was all happening during the time I was like 12, 13, 14. And they would let me come to some of their little get-togethers. Like they had cookouts, or they had pool parties and things like that. And they would let me come and hang out and be a part of that. That was just so great. They were so good to me, and a great bunch of guys at NR. The topper is, at one point, I wanted to create something for them, and I think my parents got me some clay. I had this idea that I'd mold a finger holding like a fist and one finger holding up for #1 radio station, and I'm your #1 fan. And I shaped it out of clay. Oh, it was embarrassingly awful. And I painted it, and put it on a little stand, and put something across, like a label on the bottom, Ronnie Brunk, NR's #1 super fan, or whatever. I went up to the station for one of the get-togethers, and I presented it to them. Like I know they must have had quite a laugh out of it, and I don't blame them. It was thinking back, it was an awful looking thing. If it still is in existence, like if somebody put it away in a box and kept it because it was so funny, I'd sure love to hear about that. I don't know whatever happened to it. Those were some fun days, and that's just a cool memory that I had from way back long ago. And, if anybody remembers any of that, or remembers some of the other DJs from that time period, I think there was maybe a Rod Odell at NR, and I remember Johnny Branham. And there was a couple of guys that did I was Fred Persinger, I believe. So if you know any of those folks, or if you know any of the other DJs from that time period, let me know. Leave a comment or something. Let me know your memories of NR. That would be really cool. I'd love to hear it. All right, see you.